business with a servant's heart. Welcome to the podcast. Steve Ramona. Inspiration, motivation takes. Listen to the podcast.
Welcome to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart. I'm your host, Steve Ramona. Every episode is an invitation, a reminder that business and life isn't just about profit. It's about purpose. It's about showing up with a servant's heart in every deal, every decision, every day to make that powerful impact on others. My guest today is going to light you up. He's going to motivate you. He's going to challenge you way across the pond in the UK. He's out there in England at 6 p.m., so we appreciate him coming on. And I think more importantly, you're going to walk away with tools that inspire action both in your life and the lives of others to be able, he's going to give you tools to serve others. Before you dive in, here's your homework today. How are you going to serve yourself and others today? Today doesn't have to be a big impact. Even a small act of kindness or courage can change the game for anybody. I don't care what age, what gender, we can make a difference. So lean in, take notes. Let's discover how servant leadership and business can create these ripple effects that last far beyond the bottom line. Quick shout out to my sponsor, Epic Impact, the only universal emotionally resonant messaging framework that works anywhere for any audience. This system, four-step system, transform how I pitch, how I post on social media, and how I develop my podcast. I get to engage, I get to inspire, get to persuade, but more importantly, I get to close with clarity. I use it daily and it works. Grab your free trial at epicimpact.ai with promo code Steve to start inspiring action today. Let's bring on our guest, Trevor. Welcome to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart.
I'm excited to be here, Steve, and I can't wait for the questions, including a surprise question, I'm told, later on.
To surprise you, and not the audience if they've been listening, but it may be a surprise. But I want to start with the inspiration to start coaching. Where'd that come from?
The inspiration to start coaching came from, I track it back to a time actually when I was a journalist, where I was technocratically, sort of producing, writing stories, churning things out. And somebody took me to one side once and said, the most important thing that you can learn about journalism in that case was to put yourself in the reader's shoes. And I took that on board. I didn't really understand what they meant, but they just said, go and ask some readers, go and talk to some readers. And when I did that, I realized that there was a whole different set of perspectives where whatever we were producing in my sort of younger career wasn't quite resonating in the way we thought. I went through various other guises in my career, and through setting up my own business, I then ended up coaching people, first of all, in setting up their businesses and then in leadership roles. But that message about putting yourself in other people's shoes just resonated with me. It was the underlying inspiration, if you like, for coaching. And so what I think executive coaching is enabling people to find their own answers, to put themselves in their own shoes in order to get new insights. You're not giving them the answers, you're helping them find their answers. So it relates directly in a way to what your show is all about, around sort of, a servant's heart. And it's just really all to do with, the inspiration being about just understanding the other guy.
Yeah, that's powerful. Is this the same in the UK as it would be in the United States or any other country, or does it change a little bit?
Oh, that's an interesting question. You mean the inspiration or the coaching? I think there are stylistic differences, but I think this is a deeply human thing. Ultimately, is that at the end of the day, people want you to, listen to what their challenges are, to, yes, empathize with them, to be curious about those challenges, to be creative in helping them find solutions, help them find their own clarity. And then I think the role towards the end of a coaching process is about helping them find the commitment to do something about it and building their confidence, which is my big thing, really, the confidence aspect.
Yeah. What challenges in journalism that you learned made you better today that you learned back then?
That I thought when I was a journalist that I was a good listener, and that's, I say that deliberately in the past tense, because I realized only when I left journalism that I wasn't a very good listener at that point. I was listening for certain things. I was listening for a headline. I was listening for a soundbite. I was listening for whatever it took to finish the story and file it. And that didn't necessarily mean that I was a good listener. I was listening for what I wanted to listen to. It was a sort of, it's a kind of anti-lesson, Steve, that I kind of I spent, you know, period then in consultancy where I started to understand what good listening was all about. You getting back to the putting yourself in the shoes thing again, and just realizing that that although I had learnt certain lessons in journalism, I hadn't taken it the full caboodle, if you like, all the way along.
And journalism is so much different than coaching, but they can learn from each other, which you've done. I love that.
Absolutely.
Communicate. So let's dive deeper. Communications. Listening is part of that, but talk about the whole communication aspect that people need to learn.
I think, do you mean specifically in terms of leaders
For
or,
business, yeah, business leaders and their
yeah.
business.
Well, okay. If I talk about it in sort of terms of current issues, you know, there are a lot of established leaders who are learning, and there was a big acceleration of this, of course, during the pandemic, you know, learning that their old leadership styles, the command and control kind of styles that they had, just simply weren't cutting it in terms of engaging a workforce that largely wasn't there, you know, physically there in the workplace. And although obviously we're now past the pandemic, a lot of that leadership style change has had to has become embedded. And I think that for those established leaders, we're seeing that some are still struggling with that in that environment and are having to adapt. Then you've got another side of communication for emerging leaders, maybe people who are going into their first role as leaders, or perhaps have not really seen themselves as leaders. You know, that they've been maybe experts within the business, knowledge experts, and they've been promoted into some kind of leadership role. A little bit of imposter syndrome, I think, in there, all of which needs powerful and effective sort of communication, and also before that, a sort of a mindset from moving away from self-doubt about the way they communicate to just finding their own authentic style.
That's key. I like that. So tell the audience what your definition of servant leadership really is in your mind.
Well, in terms of servant leadership, I think that leaders, again, I'll break it into those two areas. For the established leader, the servant leadership is maybe nominally in charge or have responsibility in that area, but he is genuinely and empathetically not regarding himself as superior in any way to the person there. Sorry, when I say him, I mean him or her or whoever, you know. So just to make that clear, and and in the case of the emerging leader, I think there is a misconception that if you are leading, particularly this happens a lot in early leadership experiences, that you sometimes have to sort of pin your shoulders back and talk a bit more loudly. It's nothing to do with that. You could have a quiet communication style. You could have a noisy communication style. You could be deeply introverted. You could be deeply extroverted. You know, you could have any style, and you just have to find that style. So that's what it means, I think, in terms of servant leadership. But it's being about relatable to those around you, and not seeing yourself as, you know, necessarily morally superior or strategically superior in any way. Everybody has good ideas. Everybody has to contribute to finding solutions to the very difficult challenges that we've got out there at the moment.
Collaboration is the word that comes to my head. That's perfect. Servant leader is a collaborator. It's awesome. Well, with that storytelling, I love storytelling. That's why I'm a podcast host. You as well. We'll talk about your podcast. But how does that play in communication with business storytelling?
I'm sorry, say that again.
So how does storytelling play in business in the
Oh,
communication?
oh well, I mean, it's fundamental. I mean, you know, you speak to any. I mean, it's not just a tool in your armor. You know, a tool in your hand to sort of use. It is communication, if you like. You know, if you are a leader in a business, you need to paint a purpose and a vision for where people are going to go. Okay, you need to also make sure you've got good people around you who help you with the detail of how you're going to get from A to B, but you have to set them a purpose, an aspiration. It has to be one in the spirit of servant leadership that matches the collective values of the organization. So you just, it's storytelling is not just a thing that you whip out when you need it. It has to be central to what you're doing. It's an everyday, not a just when I need it thing.
Every day, that's a key word. And you said purpose. Your coaching, a big part of it's purpose, finding that purpose, which a lot of people are still trying to find. How do you help people in business find their purpose?
I I don't, well, you can't tell people what their purpose should be, obviously. So let's start there. Um, you ask them questions that relate to their world. First of all, you ask a lot of purpose-driven questions, such as why? Why are you doing this? Why, whether you're leading a business or whether you've started a business, it doesn't matter. Why do you want to even start the business in the first place? Why do you think that it's a business that somebody might want to engage with in any way? Then you move on to other questions. The what exactly is it that you are selling? If you are selling, to serve this purpose, who are you selling it to, or who are you giving it to if it's not a commercial business? That why, the what, the who, to me, my sort of golden triangle, if you like, of purpose that exists in a business. So just understanding yourself in terms of why you are doing this in the first place, who you are trying to reach to, and what you're trying to reach them with.
So, speaking of storytelling, can you tell us a story of a client you worked with and the success they had?
Um, I was working with a client. I'm gonna focus on a client who was an emerging leader. Let's put them in that category. And they had been somebody who had really just, they were struggling in their first job, and the reason that they were struggling was because they had just suddenly been promoted and taken on 3 or 4 reports, people sort of working for them. And there was somebody who was much more experienced than them, who was quite sort of set in their ways, and there was somebody who had joined before them and who they had been promoted over. There was somebody who was working virtually, wasn't coming into the office at all because of a medical condition, and there were other people who were sort of working in the team as well. Lots of different situations, lots of different sort of styles needed. This person said, this is my first leadership role. I don't know what to do. I don't know, I'm going to call him Fred, but his name's not Fred.
Sure.
And we kind of worked on a way of getting him to communicate in all these different situations. We did some role playing. I never at any stage told him what he should be doing, but I just asked him the sorts of questions that elicited that insight himself into his sort of various sort of styles. The question is, the answer is that at the end of the time, who should he be? He should be Fred. And he should approach things in his own way. So everything that I do relating to that purpose, your whys, your whats, your whos, is also, how does that help you be who you want to be as a leader in order to do what you need to do as a leader in order to have the results that the team needs in order to perform in that business.
You mentioned questions and listening, 2 vital keys for a leader and 2 vital keys for business owner. You guys listen out there, entrepreneurs especially, questions and listen. You do that, and he just made you $1 million. I guarantee it, because I've seen it happen with a number of people. What does the future of coaching look like for you?
Do you mean for me personally, or the
Personally.
future of the profession? Yeah,
You
personally.
personally.
For me, the thing that really drives me, I mean, it's a cliche to say, does it get you out of the bed in the morning? But it really does. It's all about one word, and that word is confidence. I have, since my younger days, I've been somebody who's been on a lifelong struggle themselves to overcome long periods of self-doubt, in order to become more self-confident. It's not so. I've gone through a sort of confidence shift. It doesn't mean you don't feel self-doubt or still feel self-doubt, but you reduce it down to a size where it is something that is manageable and you can rationalize, and you overcome it quicker and quicker in order to sort of move on to better things. So for coaching, for me personally, and you'll know this, Steve, for having been on my podcast, that my podcast is all about the confidence journey for entrepreneurs. And we had a great chat a couple of weeks ago about that. But whether you're running your own business or whether you are in a leadership position in somebody else's business, it is all about the confidence shift, if you like, the journey from self-doubt to self-confidence. And whilst there's nothing wrong with self-doubt, it's about how you manage that, how you overcome it. And that is my personal passion thing that's driving me morning, noon, and night, sort of every day, is to, make anybody who I come across, realize that actually there's a lot more in them to come out than they realize, and that there are certain things holding them back. Self-doubt loses you opportunities, and it causes untold stress and worry in your life. And those twin perils, if you like, are things that you that don't need to, well, they do need to exist to a certain extent to go on, but they need to be aware of those, and to manage those in order to reap the sort of confidence dividend, if you like.
Yeah, self-doubt. I've read many stories of very celebrities, successful business people. They've all had it, and they will all have it, because we're human, we're fallible. And that's where you come in to help with that. It's a powerful thing, especially self-awareness. You said earlier, everybody's different. Every leadership style is different. They'll work for people, not everybody. And you don't want to work with everybody. It's too big of a world to do that, or even the United States. Well, let's talk about the podcast, Merrycast. Great name, reminds me of Christmas.
Yeah.
Talk about it.
Well, my name is Merriden, so that's the merry bit. So it's MERRI hyphen cast, and it is completely about that journey, that confidence journey. And we have had, we've done about sort of nearly 70 podcasts. Now, nowhere near the number that you've done, but we're in the foothills compared with you and your podcast. But what we are about is getting people who are entrepreneurs, who have been through the journey, to really bust a myth about what an entrepreneur is, if you like. There's this picture of, in this country, there is a sort of a kind of stereotype of a extrovert pointing. Well, you'll know the show, we won't mention it, the show where people point at people and say you're fired in a loud voice. And and that show, in a way, it's entertainment, but it does not represent the world of being an entrepreneur as I see it, because you can have extrovert entrepreneurs, introvert ones, process driven ones, creative ones, or a whole mixture of those things. And the personality type is not a prerequisite for doing that journey. I've interviewed people who have been, their marketing purpose, if you like, is around sort of encouraging introverted entrepreneurs to realize that they are entrepreneurs in the first place. And so we look at a sort of, yes, we obviously by definition talking to people who are still entrepreneurs, probably in some cases after many years, so they've been successful in longevity, but also to talk about not just the triumphs, but also some of the tragedies along the way, the things where they screwed up, where they made a mess of things, and to just talk about what they learned and how they overcome it. And the idea is that the listener at the start of their journey, or at least early in their journey, is thinking, hey, this guy sort of overcame this problem, that means I can as well.
God, that's powerful, what you just said right there. When you see hope in the horizon from somebody, that's why I love your podcast. You're giving people hope. This is going to be hard, and that's hard for me, but pick one of your guests, their story that really resonated with you.
Oh my God, there's so many.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
I'm actually going to go back to the very first one that we did. There's a lady called Steph Taylor, who is a digital product maestro. Her thing is around launching digital products, and she has been giving these, well, for years now. She's been giving these kind of master classes. You sort of sign up, for the master class, and with a lot of these models, there's a free bit, where you get a webinar and then you end up sort of paying for something. I ended up paying because she was so good at what she was doing, but she told a story, initially in the webinar and then later in interview on our podcast, around her crippling imposter syndrome, and that she just went from sort of just making ends meet, so it'd be like $2,000 in January, $2,000 in February, $2,000 in March, $25,000 in April suddenly. So she just suddenly hit the jackpot because she had been working very hard without a lot of success. Her success came very suddenly, and she was thinking, am I big enough to do this? Am I able to? And she talks about this journey that she went on, and she realized that, so not only is she good enough, to deal with that situation, but that she found ways in order to, I mean, I'm not, she didn't use this phrase, but it's the best way I can think of describing it, to put herself into the center of a hurricane, if you like. That we all know that if you're at the center of a hurricane, it's completely still, and she found those moments where she could almost like isolate herself, think strategically about what she was doing. But the whole podcast is, or at least a good portion of that podcast, is around the struggle to overcome imposter syndrome. There's so many there's so
That's a
many stories in there, but
Yeah, that's a
if
good
that will
one.
do, that will do. Okay.
That's a
Yeah.
great way to start your podcast. That's for sure. Holy moly. Um, we've come to the end here. Let's ask this fun question I surprise you with. So I've reserved a restaurant in where you're living, table for four. You're going to sit in one of the chairs. So if you got three empty chairs, who would you invite, whether they're dead or alive, that you want to talk to, get to know, mentor you, that you just wanted to always want to have a conversation with? But I think more importantly, what food would you order for the table?
Okay. Am I allowed to plug the restaurant, or
Yeah,
can I say
absolutely.
what? Can I name the restaurant? Okay.
You sure
The
can.
restaurant's called Pear Tutti. It's where I live in St Albans in Hertfordshire in England. It's a most fantastic Italian restaurant. And around my table for four, I'm disappointed that it's only for four actually, but let's just have, so I've got three guests, yeah, three other guests,
Right. Three
and
guests,
okay, oh crikey, and they're alive. They've got to be alive.
live or dead, doesn't matter.
Oh, okay, all right, okay. I would love to have Nelson Mandela there, because he, I think he achieved the impossible, of reconciling a very divided nation, and I've read the history of his life, and I just cannot, I still don't quite understand how he did it, how he was able to be so able to put past bitterness and divide aside in the pursuit of a peaceful nation. That's number one. I've aimed very high with my first guest here. My second guest, uh, Lionel Messi, the world's greatest footballer, in my opinion. Many people would dispute that, but in my book, he definitely is. He's playing over in America at the moment, and to me, he is. I don't understand. I want to know what goes on inside his brain at the moment he receives the ball, because he just does things with the ball that people just wouldn't understand. The third one, um, I would, I would like to. This is more political. I'd like to get Tony Blair in actually, because former prime minister in this country, because he enjoyed a period of great popularity, and then he became a lot less popular over the Iraq War in this country, and I'm not interested in asking him the political questions about that, but I am interested in knowing somebody who goes from a period of popularity to deep unpopularity, about what's that like and what it does to you. So I'm setting aside the rights and wrongs of that, which I know are a whole separate sort of subject in itself. But I just want to know, when you have been lapping it up, in terms of the basking in the popularity, to just suddenly be deeply unpopular, and how do you react to that, and what does it change inside you?
Great question. Great question. Well, that's a good table. It's a powerful table. Definitely have to have Secret Service around there. That's for sure. That's awesome. Can't go wrong with Italian. I love it. Well, thank you for being an incredible guest. You've really motivated, inspired, and educated the audience. I know people listening might want to reach out to you. How can they find you?
Well, they can get hold of me, if they're on LinkedIn, they'll find me pretty easily on LinkedIn. So it's Trevor Merriden, the Merriden spelled MERRIDEN. They can get hold of me by email on trevor.merriden@merribournemedia.co.uk. Or if they just want to go and look at the website and contact us through that, that's merribourne.co.uk, merribourne.co.uk.
Simple and easy. That's what a good leader does. I appreciate that. Thank you, Trevor. I appreciate the time and you taking the time. Audience, here's your homework for the end. Subscribe to the YouTube channel or subscribe to Trevor's podcast, because this is where I see podcasts. We love our subscribers, but you're getting the gift to be able to share. So you're listening to Trevor's podcast and it resonates with you, for somebody that needs confidence, needs empathy, needs to be pragmatic and friendly. These are things that he talked about. Didn't say those words, but that's what he was talking about. Share it with them and they watch the podcast. They go, man, I got to reach out to Trevor. Or it just motivated them to do something. Me and Trevor would be super happy with that. That's where the subscription comes in, because you get these new podcasts and you'll be able to share them as gifts. So with that being said, me and Trevor want to thank all of you for watching or listening to this podcast. And we'll see you all in the next episode of Doing Business with a Servant's Heart. Have a great day, everyone.